Good morning. Welcome back to our class on purpose. This is our final class in this series. That doesn't mean we're not going to have classes on Sunday, even when we don't do the series. So next week there'll be a class, God willing. Since our course revolves a lot around the idea of divine providence, how everything that happens has a reason and a purpose, we'll hear one final story for this series. It's a long story, but it's a very powerful one by the same storyteller that you heard last time, who happens to be very good.
Several years ago, there was a young man by the name of Dolby Mandelbaum. He's walking in Jerusalem. He's heading to an apartment where there resides a rabbi. His name was Erez Mishakovsky. Erez Mishakovsky was the headmaster of a school that Dolby had attended many years before. Why was Dolby going to see his old headmaster? Well, there's a tradition in Israel and perhaps in other places that when you're about to get married, instead of mailing an invitation to the individual that inspired you most in your life, you hand deliver it. Dolby was engaged to get married, and in his mind, Rabbi Mishakovsky really helped change his life and put him in the direction that he went. And therefore, he's bringing this rabbi, who he hadn't seen in years, an invitation to his wedding. He knocks on the door. Rabbi Mishakovsky opens the door, immediately recognizes his student of years ago, and he says, "To what do I owe the great honor of your visit, Dolby?" And Dolby says, "I'm getting married, and I came to deliver an invitation because you have had such an impact in my life." Mishakovsky's happy, very nice to see him. In fact, he was one of his earlier students of his early years of his school. Nice to see how he has grown up. Now, although it was years ago that he attended Mishakovsky's school, he always remembered him. After he went to this particular school, he ended up meeting up with different schools of Chabad. He became a Chabad student. He, in fact, was engaged to someone from a Chabad family. Rabbi Mishakovsky's school was not a Chabad school, but still, he felt that Rabbi Mishakovsky set him straight on the path that he needed to go. Rabbi Mishakovsky opens the invitation, takes a look at it, looks it over, and says, "Wow, nice, very nice. I plan on being at the wedding. It'll be my honor to be at the wedding." He says, "I see the girl that you're marrying in the family, I see. She's from Chabad." And he says, "Yeah, and you, Dolby, you became Chabad too?" Yeah, very nice, very nice. Tell me something. Do you know if your future mother-in-law ever visited the Lubavitch Rebbe when he gave out dollars on a Sunday? Now back to the background of this is, for many years, the Lubavitch Rebbe on Sunday would stand outside his office, and anyone in the world that wanted to come see him would be able to line up, lines stretched for blocks, for hours. You would have an opportunity to see the leading holy rabbi of our generation, to ask for a blessing that you needed for something in life. And in that encounter, the Rebbe would also give you a crisp dollar bill. And he would ask you to take that dollar bill and do something good with it. Give it to charity, give it to another person, so that when there's an encounter of two individuals, a third person benefits from it. That was the way the Rebbe thought. And so it was called that you go to the Rebbe for dollars. And you would get a dollar. Now, because you got a dollar in your hand from such a holy figure, you'd want to keep it. But the Rebbe said you should give a dollar to another person. So what did you do? What was the trick? You exchanged it. You kept the dollar that the Rebbe gave you, and you gave from your own wallet. Usually you increased it. You gave a $5 bill, a $10 bill to a poor person, the next person that you saw. But this way you would collect dollar bills that the Lubavitch Rebbe himself handed you with a blessing. And people looked at that with tremendous value. So here's Rabbi Mishakovsky asking this boy that's getting married if his future mother-in-law ever got a dollar bill from the Lubavitch Rebbe. And if so, do you know when? No, he said, no, I never actually asked her this question, but you know what? The next time I see her, I'll ask her the question. I'll come back and I'll give you the answer. Very well, very well. The next time Dolby was by his bride's house for Shabbat, he asks his future mother, "Tell me, did you get a dollar from the Lubavitch Rebbe?" And she says, "Of course I did, yes." "And when did you get the last time that you went? She said, I actually remember it well. It was the month of Shvat, about February time, in the year 5751, which would be about February 1991, was when she remembered getting this dollar bill. Okay, Dolby has the information. He was given a homework task from his old teacher. He comes back to the apartment at some point later and he says, you asked me a question, the answer is yes. She did. Shvat 5751. Rabbi says, thank you very much for getting back to me. You know, I have a story to tell you that's worth $1 million. $1 million. But because I really like you, I'll tell it to you for $10,000. Dolby says, I don't have $10,000. So he says, you know what, I'll make a deal. Aside for coming to your wedding, the week after the wedding, you have parties every night, Sheva Brachot. Invite me to one of those Sheva Brachot parties, and I'll tell that story then for free. But trust me, it's a good story. Okay, I'll get you an invitation. Anyway, Dolby gets married. The wedding was beautiful. Rabbi Mishkovsky was out at the wedding, danced with his former student of many years. Beautiful wedding, and kept his word. A Sheva Brachot party a few nights later, held in an outdoor area, big barbecue. They set up a microphone, and the Chatan gets up and he says, my former teacher, Rabbi Mishkovsky, dean of this and this school, has a story to tell. He assures us that it's $1 million story. Without further ado, Rabbi Mishkovsky. Rabbi Mishkovsky gets up to the microphone and he says this. So this is the story within the story. Around 25 years ago, when I got married, my wife Chani and I had an understanding. When we were dating, we discussed what type of lives we would want. And we both agreed of what we wanted in life. We wanted simplicity. She wanted and I wanted to be able to sit and study as much as possible. And so it was agreed upon that if we were to get married, I would learn what's called kollel. That's an advanced study hall for married people. My wife would take a teaching position that would help support us, and I would sit and study. It would be a simple life, not too expensive, simple apartment. That's what we wanted, simplicity. Living in Israel, studying Torah, what could be better spiritually? So there I was. We got married. I'm studying in a kollel in the city of Netanya. The kollel that I was studying at was connected to a post-high school yeshiva program for young men. So they shared the same campus. Everything was going according to plan. Life was blissful. Life was perfect. But then as I was studying, I saw something going terribly wrong with some of the younger students in the adjacent school. Many of them were becoming disaffected. Some were luring away from the yeshiva environment. They were getting involved in all sorts of inappropriate activities. And the administration of that particular school was beside themselves what to do with these kids. And the only course of action that they could come up with was to throw these kids out of school. You don't want to be here? Don't be here, leave. They wanted to preserve the integrity of the students that wanted to study. It's a great debate amongst educators. What's your role? What's your job? But to me, the glaring question was, so if you kick these kids out, what's going to happen to them? Are you thinking about their souls? Are you thinking about their lives? Are you thinking about their families? Each one of them is a precious soul. And here you're giving up on them by just kicking them out. So although again, I'm in a different school, I'm in an advanced school for married people, which is sharing a campus, I mixed in. I went to the principal's office. I said, I see you kicking kids out left and right. Aren't you concerned about what's going to happen to them? And at first I got the look of, who do you think you are telling us what to do? You're not a member of the staff of this school. I said, no, I'm not a member of the staff. I'm just a concerned fellow Jew. There's got to be a better way. He said, we've tried everything with them. We tried enticing them. We tried inspiring them. We tried bribing them. We've done everything. We're done. We're done. We can't do it anymore. So I don't know what got into me, he says. He's telling the story at this party after the wedding, remember? And he says, I decided, rent a little house. And I'll have these kids stay at this house. And for a few hours a day, I'll tear myself away from my own studies, and I'll teach them myself. And then maybe I'll find someone in the community that could mentor them in some type of job, perhaps. So we'll be doing some studying and some job training. So I started doing that on the side. Then I needed to pay rent. That's a problem. So I didn't have the money. So I started raising some money from some of the other families in the community. And then we picked up a few more students. And then it involved more of my time, more fundraising, more programming, more teaching. Truth is, he said, I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I was just a simple guy, supposed to mind my own business, but I couldn't. And I just found myself torn in two worlds, focusing on the life that Hani and I planned out, and my guilt of seeing these Jewish kids perhaps going to be lost to our people. And at some point I realized that my own learning and my own personal life has been thrown into disarray. Because the time that it was taking me to do this was starting to become full-time. And as overwhelmed as I was for my dear wife, she felt, and rightfully so, I was in over my head, stressed out about having to raise the funds and keep the program going. And this is not what we agreed to. We mapped out our lives. We planned it out. We were going all to plan. What happened here? Don't get me wrong, he's telling everyone. She understood how important the work I was doing was, but why you? We had a deal. Everything we planned is gone. And it was causing tremendous inner turmoil and a rift in our marriage. And one day I realized that it can't go on like this. I had to resolve, one way or another, how I'm going to proceed in my life. Either we're going to be together, my wife and I, and say, this is what we're doing, or I'm going to have to leave it all, hope someone else fills my shoes, and go back to the quiet life of sitting and learning, studying myself. But I can't do both. It's not going to work. So I said to my wife, honey, I'm going to take a day off tomorrow. You take a day off tomorrow. Let's just go out. We'll have a picnic somewhere. We're going to talk through life, and together we will make a decision. We'll do it together. And whatever we decide, we both go in completely. If we decide I'm leaving this and going back to the study all day, then that's what we're doing. If we decide that I'm doing this, we're doing it together. But we can't go on like this anymore. Hani agreed. Next day we both took off from work. We're going to have a picnic. We went to this park, sat down on the grass. It was right next to this natural pool of water. And the pool of water was being fed by a waterfall that was coming from a higher level in the park. So there's water coming down from a higher level, a waterfall into this beautiful stream that's near us. I'm facing the water, Hani has her back to the water. And I'm trying to think, okay, so what do we do now? This was a great idea that we have this picnic, but like, how do we begin this conversation? And where are we going with this? I can't find the right words to start the conversation. But suddenly, in the corner of my eye, I see something red tumbling down the falls. Was that a red bundle? Was it a red backpack that I just saw? Or were my eyes deceiving me? And I immediately leaped to my feet. I jumped into the water, all my clothes on, and the bundle's first bob to the surface was miraculously within my grasp. Because it was a little girl, no more than a toddler. I grabbed her, and she was gasping and coughing and spitting out water, but thank God very much alive. I staggered out of the water, gripping this bundle. I was very shaken. The child was terrified, of course. Hani saw this happen so quickly, I just ran and jumped, and coming out with a toddler in my hand, she put the blanket around the baby, calmed the baby. And we realized that this whole thing happened so fast that the child's family must be playing in the top part of the park and never even realized that the toddler is missing. So we began the trek to the upper terrace of the park. Me in my sopping wet clothes, holding this red bundle. We get there and we immediately see that there's this large family spread out across a number of blankets, lots of kids eating and talking and laughing and enjoying themselves. And clearly, still at this point, no one had an inkling that this little girl dressed in red wasn't amongst her siblings and cousins. As I approached them, I didn't have to say a word. Everyone stared at me in horror, transfixed, unable to say anything. The child's mother sees the scene and becomes hysterical. She suddenly grasps the enormity of what just took place. And she began shrieking. As words started rushing from her mouth, she pulls the child from my arms, holds her, kisses her, and begins to cry. And she starts thanking God, and thanking my wife, and thanking me. How can I ever thank you? How can I ever thank you? She kept on repeating over and over, how can I ever thank you? And suddenly she calls for someone from her family to go to her car and to fetch her purse. And I immediately said, stop, I'm not taking money for this. Don't bring your purse here. And she reaches for her purse and she takes out a single American dollar bill from her wallet and she wants to hand it to me. Lest anyone think that her intended reward for my act of heroism was one single dollar, which is about 4 shekel, she quickly explained that this was no ordinary dollar bill. She was giving me the most precious thing she owned, a dollar bill given to her by the Lubavitcher Rebbe himself. And I repeated again that I didn't want any rewards for this. I simply did what anyone would do, what I was supposed to do. And she kept insisting that I take it. And finally I said to her, listen, you're a Chabad family. To you, this dollar bill that was given to you by the Lubavitcher Rebbe is the most precious thing you have. I'm not a Chabadnik. I'm not even a Chassid. To me, the dollar is a dollar. It doesn't have that value. You should keep it. It doesn't make sense for you to give that away. The one that sees the value in it should be the one to hold on to it and to keep it. At that point, she gave me this look that only a Jewish mother knows how to give. And she said to me, you take this dollar. You take this dollar from the Rebbe. And I promise you that it will bring you clarity, it will bring you peace, and it will bring you blessings. And it will bring strength into your life. And with that, she just put that dollar in my hand. Remember Rabbi Mishakovsky is telling the story at the Shever Brachas party that he asked to be invited to? As he reaches this point, he reaches into his pocket and he pulls out this crisp dollar bill from his coat pocket and he shows it to the audience. And then he reads on the dollar bill that it says, from the Holy Admor of Lubavitch, from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, dated Shabbat 5751. Other than Shabbat, this dollar bill is with me all the time, he says to the audience. Now you may think that I was the savior of that little girl, but that's not the full story. You see, what brought my wife and me to the park that day was a last-ditch attempt to find an answer to our dilemma. When that baby fell into that waterfall, it became clear, the answer was clear to us that my mission was to devote myself to saving lives. That was the answer. And the fact that the response to my action was to be given a dollar bill from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who devoted his entire life, his entire leadership to bringing Jewish souls back to their roots, served to reinforce what my path must be. My calling was to save others. An unmistakable sign that tumbled from the heavens along with a dollar bill from Brooklyn was attesting to this. Here is your answer. And because of that life-altering moment, we packed our bags, we moved from Netanya, we moved to Jerusalem, and we opened up a yeshiva that year for boys who needed a different approach, who couldn't handle a full day in yeshiva, who needed a few hours of this and a few hours of that. And today's groom, Dolby, he was from our first students. As for today's bride, I must say that it was so nice to see you at your wedding wearing a white dress instead of the red one you were wearing the first time we met. Everyone at the party sat stunned in silence. The bride's mother wiped her tears and said, and Kavod Rav, honored rabbi, it's nice to see you in dry clothes rather than the soaking ones you were wearing the first time we met.
Enjoyed this story? Come again. Bring a friend. StoriesToInspire.org.
Okay, let's get back to this theme of purpose. There are different levels. There's a daily purpose. Every person wakes up in the morning. We say Modani, we thank God for being alive. But we also have to focus on why we're alive. And what is this day going to be in terms of fulfilling our purpose? How are we going to fill the purpose for this day? Every day has its own life. A day is a lifetime. And then, of course, the same thing works for the week and for the month and for the year and for different stages of life, different generations. But there's an ultimate purpose, there's an overarching purpose that all of history exists to reach to a climax, which we call the Messianic Age, or another way of referring to it is the final redemption, when the world, the Jewish people, and by extension the whole world, will be redeemed and will live in a good world, in a world that God had envisioned at the time of creation, that's the type of world He wants. And we accomplish that. That's what Judaism is all about, through the things that we do to make a difference in this world, to elevate the world, to make the world, in the words of the Midrash, a dwelling place for God. And that process took place from the beginning of creation. It was reinforced at Sinai, where God gave us very explicit directions. And it's going to happen very soon. The Rebbe made it very clear that we are at the threshold of that age. Threshold means that you're standing in between two periods, just like a threshold is between the outside and the inside. And the Rebbe once remarked that the redemption is on the threshold, and it's waiting for us to take the redemptive energies and bring it into the home, into our homes, bring it into our lives. And in order to accomplish the last stage of transition from the period which we call galut, exile, and redemption, we have to develop the proper mindset. We can't go with the same mindset that we've had until now. We have to be more expansive, with more joy, with more excitement, and living our Judaism with joy and expansiveness. There's a quote from Ethics of the Fathers that we discussed last week. We spoke about the three different levels. What I'm going to do now is something a little bit different. We're going to show that the three questions, where do you come from, where are you going, and before whom you are destined to be judged and given accounting, has a relevance to this whole purpose of the Messianic Age and the challenges that exist in that effort, in that direction. And it's based on a narrative in the Torah with Jacob and his brother Esau. But who is the author of this Mishnah? It's a man by the name of Akavia ben Mahalalel, Akavia the son of Mahalalel. And I think there's a message in the name itself. The word Akavia is an Aramaic name, and the root of that name is the same as the Hebrew word Akev, which means heel. The word heel is often used to describe the end of days, the end of the exile. So Akavia represents the way we approach this end of the exile through prayer. Ben is the son of, the product of. Maharal, the root of that word is Hallel, which is praise or prayer. The basic message over here is that we have to ask for it. We can't just sit back and let it happen. Part of the Messianic age depends on not only our efforts to do good, but we have to also pray for it and ask for it. Constantly beseech God and tell Him to bring us to this age that we've been waiting for thousands of years. But there are negative forces. Esau, Jacob's brother, is often cited biblically and Talmudically and midrashically as a symbol of evil who tries to destroy that which is good and holy, which is represented by Jacob. So we have these negative forces that try to talk us out of forging ahead. And he uses a three-pronged attempt to derail us, using the same questions that Ethics of the Father uses. What goes on? What happens over here? Jacob, to give you a little bit of the biblical background. Jacob tricks his father, Isaac, and he gets the blessings that Isaac had in mind for Esau. And when Esau discovered what happened, he conspired to kill Jacob. So Jacob flees to a place called Haran, where his uncle lived, and he marries there and establishes a family and becomes a very successful, very wealthy man. And after 22 years, he returns back to his homeland in Israel. And as he's returning, he discovers that his brother Esau is confronting him, is coming towards him with 400 armed men. And Jacob prepares himself for a battle, for prayer, and for a gift to give Esau. But as he's waiting to meet his brother, he gets into a wrestling match. And he wins that battle with the angel of Esau. But when Esau, I'm using the Hebrew interchangeably with the English Esau, but I think he used the Hebrew himself, Esau. So when Esau sees this elaborate gift, he asks three questions. He says, whose are you? The people that were in part of Jacob's entourage, whose are you? That parallels from where do you come? And then he asks, where are you going? That's the same thing as in the Ethics of the Fathers. Where are you going? And to whom belong all these things before you? Parallels before whom you are destined to be judged and given accounting. He is asking for an accounting for everything that he's being sent. So Esau was asking these three questions. One of the Hasidic masters explains that Esau was trying to derail Jacob's mission. And how does he derail it? With these three questions. But this Hasidic author, known as the Chidushei Harim, doesn't explain what exactly is the art. What is he trying to prove to Jacob? What is he trying to say that will undermine Jacob's whole mission? So here we go in three levels over here. Whose are you? When a person is told that he has a mission to change the world, to make the transition from the world the way it is now to a perfect world, to a utopian world, to change the whole world. So the other side of negativity comes to us and says, where do you come from? You should know your humble beginnings. You're not a descendant of some illustrious people. You don't have, in Yiddish we call this yichus. You're not a scion of an illustrious family. You don't even have a strong spiritual upbringing. So why do you have this grandiose vision that you're going to change the world, that you matter, what you're going to do is going to make a difference? Think small. Don't try to think big. Don't think in terms of changing the whole world. But you know what? Don't even bother to start to go on that road. It's presumptuous on your part to do that. That's what we have, an internal voice that tells us, don't think you're going to make a difference. Don't even bother beginning. That's the first message that we get from Esav, from the forces of negativity. But then we don't listen, and we start on this trek. So Esav comes to us again and he says, where are you going? Slow down, or go back, retreat. You're not equipped to go very far. The goal is elusive. And the intention is for us to literally slow down and try to find something else to do with our lives, not try to fulfill the purpose for which we were created, for which the whole world was created. And then, when you don't listen and you keep on going on the road, the last arrow he takes out of his quiver, to whom belong all these things before you? Before whom are you destined to be judged and given accounting? Even if you succeed, your accomplishments will be dwarfed and eclipsed by the great people. You're never going to compare to the great tzaddikim. You can't compare to Abraham, Isaac, or Jacob. You can't compare to the great prophets, to the great sages, to the holy people. You're going to be embarrassed. You're going to look like you're a nobody, because compared to the greats, you are a nobody. And especially in the Messianic age, when we believe that the dead will come back to life, who are we going to be compared against? We'd be compared to all the biblical heroes and all the holiest people of the past. We're going to look very, very stupid. We're going to be embarrassed. We're going to be humbled. So what's the answer? What does Jacob say? So the answer is, you should say, we belong to your servant Jacob. The first argument was, who do you think you are? You don't have any yichus, you don't have any pedigree, any illustrious ancestors. You have no illustrious ancestors. Yes, we do. Every Jew is a descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Once a very prominent business person came to the Rebbe and he tried to brag to the Rebbe that he had a service on Rosh Hashanah for Jews who have no background. And the Rebbe said, what? And the Rebbe said, there's no such thing as a Jew without a background. Every Jew has a background. Every Jew is a descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, of the patriarchs and the matriarchs. And what does that mean, that we descend from them? You know, genetically, you don't have very much of the genetic makeup of your great going back 30 generations, but we all possess the genetic material of the patriarchs and the matriarchs, the spiritual genetic material. Just like the body has genetic material, the same thing, the soul has genetic material, and we are all in possession of the same genetic material as the patriarchs and the matriarchs. So there's no such thing when Esav comes to you and says, who do you think you are? You have no background. That's not true. We have a background. And what about a convert to Judaism who's not a descendant of the patriarchs? So Maimonides, in a letter that he wrote to a convert who was being mocked by other Jews, tragically, saying that he doesn't have any illustrious ancestry, Maimonides writes a long letter, and at the end of the letter he writes, the quote I'm quoting now in the translation, while we connect ourselves to God through the Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, you connect yourself directly to the one who created the world. You have a direct link. You don't even have to go through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Although Maimonides says you could even say in your prayers that our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You don't even need that. You have a direct connection. What about the second argument that Esav poses? Where do you think you're going? So the answer is, this is a gift. And the Hebrew word is mincha, sent to my master, to Esau. What is a mincha? A mincha is a flour offering. In Leviticus, it speaks about different kinds of offerings. You can offer an animal as a sacrifice, and if you're poor, you bring a mincha, a flour offering. Now, when the Torah describes the offering of the poor person, it uses the term nefesh if a soul brings an offering. It doesn't say that when a person brings an elaborate offering, a wealthy offering, because when a poor person brings an offering, he's bringing his soul. He's not just bringing a gift, he's bringing his own soul because of the fact that he's poor. That means the modest gesture of a simple Jew has more weight than the elaborate gestures of people who are more sophisticated. It has, your little accomplishment has greater value than the accomplishments of others who have a lot more sophistication, spiritual sophistication. And therefore, when Esav comes to you and says, who do you think you are? Where do you think you're going? He says, we're going very far because what we're doing, the little simple Jews that we are, our efforts have so much more value because we are in many ways poor, spiritually poor. And moreover, it's enhanced because of you, Esav. You should know that you, Esav, we should really compliment you and thank you because the obstacles that you pose make our efforts even more meaningful, even more powerful. That's why the Talmud says that a Baal Teshuvah, the Jew who returns to Judaism after straying away from it, is greater than the tzaddik, than the one who was always righteous, because he struggles. The struggle makes the person superior to the one who was always in a good place. And then the third argument, behold, he is himself behind us. The people who Esav meets are Jacob's servants and his entourage. And he says, he is behind us. That has a dual meaning. Number one, when the Esav argues that who do you think you are? You're not going to fulfill your mission and you're nothing. No, we're not nothing. We're the ones who are going to bring the redemption. It's through our efforts. But how do we have the power compared to our forebears? We are much lower, much weaker, less endowed than our ancestors. So how could we bring Mashiach? That's an argument that many people say. If the Baal Shem Tov couldn't bring Mashiach, if Maimonides couldn't bring Mashiach, if Rashi couldn't bring Mashiach, and I could go on listing thousands of names, and these were the holiest and greatest people, they couldn't do it, how could we do it? And the answer is because we're standing on their shoulders. We have the cumulative positive energy of all the generations before us. So it's like the child standing on the shoulders of the adult who could see further. The child could see further, he's taller. So we have the cumulative energy. We have all of our forebears' energy. In addition, we add on our own little efforts. So we achieve even more. I don't know if I told this joke, but once two beggars were talking about Rothschild, and one of them said, if I would have Rothschild's wealth, I would be wealthier than Rothschild. And the other one says, how could that be? He'd be just as rich. He says, no, I would beg on the side. We might be the little beggars that we're begging on the side, but we have the wealth of all of our previous generations. So we're not going to be embarrassed because we're the ones who are going to bring the redemption. Just to share a little incident, I had to travel to Australia a number of years ago, about 15 years ago. Everything is 15 years ago in my mind. It might have been 20 years, it might be a little less, I don't know. And I knew I was going to be asked to give a sermon on Shabbos. And since I was traveling to such a distant place, I wanted to get some guidance. So I decided I'm going to ask the Rebbe by consulting his letters. I had in my little pocket, whatever you call those pocket computers, that had 24 volumes of the Rebbe's letters inside of it, and you could get a random letter. So I pushed the button for a random letter, and it gave me a letter that was addressed to that synagogue that I was going to speak in. And it was a letter about a message. Some letters were administrative things, but this letter was about a message, and the Rebbe's message was that you should know that a mitzvah is credited to the one who completes it. And therefore, we are the ones who will complete the job, and therefore we will get the credit for it. Not our forebears, not our illustrious ancestors. They contributed a lot. and they might be the giants, but we are really the ones who are completing this task. And therefore we will get credit for it, and we don't have to feel lowly, or that we don't have to feel that we're inferior, because we will have completed the task. But it goes even beyond that. The great people of the future, of the past, who will be in the future, will look up to us, not look down at us. They'll envy us. And this needs some clarification. Moses, the Torah describes as the humblest person on the face of the earth. How could someone so great, who knows how great he was, because the Torah says that, God tells him, you're the greatest. If God tells you you're the greatest, you better believe him. And yet he was the humblest person as well. So the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe, once said that there's a tradition, a Talmudic tradition, that God gave Moses a vision of the future, of every generation up until the coming of Mashiach. So he knew everything of the future. When he came to the last generation and he saw the self-sacrifice of Jews to be Jews, he saw that Jews who live in places where there's so little exposure to Judaism, or the wrong exposure to the wrong things, and a Jew manages to retain his or her identity as a Jew with self-sacrifice. We always understood this to mean Jews of the Holocaust, Jews of the Soviet Union. But you know what? I think the Jews of 21st century America will evoke even greater amazement to Moses, because of how far we are from spirituality in terms of the society that we're living in, and how many temptations there are, how many distractions there are, and we still come to learn Torah, and we still put on tefillin, and we still light Shabbos candles, and we fulfill one mitzvah, two mitzvahs, all the mitzvahs we can do. Moses looks at that and he says, wow, I am humbled. I don't have the ability to do what these people do. And that's what made Moses so humble. Yes?
I don't understand. The Alter Rebbe, of course, is a total authority on Tanakh. How did he say what he said about Moses and his knowing future generations, when in Tanakh itself it says, God says to Moses, you can only see my back? That doesn't fit.
But you can ask the question about all the prophets. All prophets prophesied about the future.
Well, I'm asking it about the Alter Rebbe, though.
No, but Moses was certainly a prophet, and he could have seen to the future. Seeing the back doesn't mean that you can't see the future, because that would be contradicted by all prophets. What seeing the back means that Moses tried to understand why God does certain things, which make no sense to us. So God tells him, you will never understand it. Only after the events, you'll be able to go back and, in retrospect, see what the reasons for the different things. It's like a person was going to the Twin Towers on 9/11, and something happened that he was detained in traffic, and he's really upset. I'm going to miss my important meeting, and he can't understand. He asks God, why are you making my life so difficult for me? And then an hour later he discovers that his life was saved because he was detained in traffic. And there are many stories like this that happened. So you understand God's ways only after the events. That's what it means, see my back. But of course Moses was able to see the future. But anyhow, the Alter Rebbe didn't make that up. He takes that from the Talmud, that God shows him the future. The Talmud even tells the story how God shows him Rabbi Akiva, how great he was, and Moses is humbled when he sees how great he was. And then God shows him how Rabbi Akiva was tortured to death. And he says, God, how could you do that to such a great person? And God says, be silent, don't ask questions, it's beyond you. So he saw the future. Okay, so we don't have to be anything to be ashamed of in the future. When Mashiach comes and we'll be reunited with all of our ancestors, they will look at us and say, I envy you. There was a person who came to the Rebbe once with a spiritual challenge that he found very hard to meet, and something that you had to be very distant from Judaism to have that challenge. I won't go into details. And the Rebbe looked at him, and the Rebbe says, "I envy you." And the Rebbe explained, "I don't have your challenge. I can't grow the way you can grow because you have that challenge. So the greatest people will not look down at us. We don't have to feel ashamed. Not only are they behind us, we stand on their shoulders, but also they are the ones who will envy us because of our dedication." Now that doesn't give us an excuse to say, well, I'm good enough. Why do I have to do any more? Because that will be embarrassed. That will embarrass us. As soon as we say we're good enough, we don't have to grow, that's an embarrassing thing. But the fact that our growth is, we can only grow to so high and the others are giants, that's not going to make us look embarrassed. Now, what is the way we fulfill our purpose? Obviously, it's doing a mitzvah. Every time we do a mitzvah, we're serving God. That fulfills our purpose. But most of our lives are not involved in doing mitzvahs, one could argue. Most of our lives, we devote a third of our life to sleeping, other large percentage of our life to eating, to leisurely things, all sorts of activities. If we just measure the amount of work that we do that is directly fulfilling our purpose, it would be only a very small percentage of our lives. So the answer is no, it's not true. Everything that's involved, for example, you gave $1 to charity. That's just one, took you 5 seconds to give it. But where did that money come from? The money came from your work. You had to earn that money. And in earning that money, what was involved? The work that you did. And the work that you did is not considered to be insignificant. That work itself is an accessory to the mitzvah that you did. When you, let's say an example, if you eat matzah on Passover, that's a mitzvah to eat matzah. Where did the matzah come from? It came from grain. Where did that grain come from? It came from the rain. It came from the sun. So you're actually changing the sun and the rain as well. They're all accessories to your mitzvah. If you have to compare, two people want to become very spiritual and close to God. One of them starts praying on Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year, and the other one, not on Yom Kippur, walks down the supermarket aisle to buy some food. Which is more spiritual? Which is more spiritual, walking down the supermarket aisle or praying on Yom Kippur? Most people would say praying on Yom Kippur, and the answer to that, the response to that is not necessarily. If you're walking down that supermarket aisle looking for a can of beans, nothing more prosaic than a can of beans, and you're looking to see that it has a insignia that it's kosher, an OU, OK, or whatever. So you're walking down that supermarket aisle is directed to serving God. So how could you argue that praying on Yom Kippur is holier than walking down the supermarket aisle? It's more intense. You feel more spiritual, perhaps. I never saw anyone getting ecstatic when they're walking down the supermarket aisle. But in terms of your fulfillment of your purpose in this world, it is exactly the same, and maybe even superior. Because when you're praying, prayer involves emotion. We don't know what your emotions are. Maybe your emotions are not really strong. But when you walk down the supermarket aisle to buy something kosher, you are serving God. You are surrendering your own desire, perhaps for some other can of beans, for this can of beans. It sounds very, very prosaic and very ordinary, but it's not ordinary. Everything you do that contributes to the mitzvah that you do. So you could do a mitzvah 1 minute a day, but 8 hours of that day, you sleep 8 hours. Why do you have to sleep 8 hours? Because you have to be rested. When you're rested, you're able to make the right decisions and you do something good. So the sleep becomes elevated. There's no such thing as an activity that is outside the pale of purposefulness. Everything fits into that purpose. So there's really a chain effect, because whatever you do, whatever mitzvah you do, there's always, it involves an object. Let's say you put on tefillin. Tefillin are made out of leather. The leather comes from an animal. That animal was lived through, it grazed on the grass wherever it came from. And that grass was produced by sunlight and rain. If you keep on tracing it back, the whole universe is involved in your little gesture, and all of it is elevated. But there are, yes?
Sorry, this will be quick, So, what about helping, like, say you're not doing the mitzvah yourself, but you're helping someone do a mitzvah? Like, maybe you're at the supermarket getting a can, a kosher can or something for them, or you're buying them candles for Shabbat or something. Like, is there any...
That's a mitzvah.
It is a mitzvah.
Helping someone else is a mitzvah.
Okay.
It's very hard to find a Jew, or any person for that matter, who doesn't occasionally do a mitzvah.
Just wondering.
There's an expression in the Talmud, even the sinners of Israel are filled with mitzvahs like a pomegranate is filled with seeds. Even the sinners of Israel. There was once a real terrible sinner who came to the rabbi and he said, "Rabbi, I have done every sin in the books. You can't show me one sin that I didn't do." And the rabbi says, "You didn't commit suicide." So the fact that a person wants to be alive is a mitzvah. But we have a lot of challenges. Anti-Semitism, the way to understand anti-Semitism is not just to find all sorts of arguments and rational explanations. Anti-Semitism is an external manifestation of internal hatred or internal negativity. So when you see anti-Semitism, one way of dealing with it, obviously if you can deal with it directly by changing people's way of thinking, that's one way of doing it. But it's changing ourselves. So when you see there is anti-Semitism in the Torah, for example, it's always understood as being a spiritual challenge. For example, Laban was Jacob's uncle and father-in-law. And in the Haggadah that we recite on Passover, it says that Laban was worse than Pharaoh. Pharaoh wanted to kill the boys, but not the girls. Laban wanted to destroy everything. And it doesn't explain where do we find that he wanted to destroy everything. So there are many different explanations for that, but one of the explanations is the word everything could also be translated as the collective. Laban didn't want Jacob to be a father of a nation. In other words, you want to be an individual who does things in a certain way, I don't care, but you can't be a nation. You can't have your own land. You can't have your own collective identity.
Is that kol? Is that the word you're referring to?
Right. Lakar et hakol. He tried to uproot the everything, the collective nature. He also tried to impose an exile mentality. The Torah describes how they made a certain monument, and Jacob called it in Hebrew Gal-Eid, a pile of testimony, a monument that will be a testimony. And Laban used the Aramaic. Why does the Torah tell us that? Who cares what language he used? The Torah doesn't speak in Aramaic except in a few places. Well, the Talmud says that Aramaic is a language of sadness. It's a language that expresses exile. Laban wanted Jews should never be able to thrive and be happy and be excited about their existence. They should always have to look at themselves and say, we are a pitiful people. And when a person thinks of himself as pitiful, they try to avoid being identified as such. That's why we find so many Jews after the Second World War, after the Holocaust, ran away, many of them to Australia, because that was the furthest they can get away from Europe, and totally erased their identity as Jews, because they were subjects of such horrific persecution. And that's That was Laban's desire, that the Jewish people, Jacob and his descendants, should never thrive and never be happy with their existence. That's called an exile mentality. And in other words, prevent them from ever reaching their goal.
Where did Laban come from? What was his tribe or lineage?
He was Aramean. He's called Lavan Harami, Lavan the Aramean. Another challenge. After the Exodus, the Jews are on their way to Israel. And there's a direct way of going northeast through the Gaza. That's the land of the Philistines. And God says, I don't want them to go to that land. So one of the explanations, why did he not want them to go that way? Because the Philistines were known as cynics, mocking everything that's positive. That's one of the negative forces that challenge us. The cynicism. You're not going to succeed. Doesn't pay to get involved.
Were the Philistines a part of the Amalekites?
No, they're a separate nation.
They had similar kinds of ways of questioning.
Yes, there are some similarities between Amalek and the Philistines. And if you look in the Code of Jewish Law, which is the most authoritative work of Jewish law after the Talmud, it starts with the words, don't be deterred by the mockers. That's why teenagers in particular are mostly affected by peer pressure. Why do they engage in all sorts of terrible behavior, dangerous behavior? It's peer pressure, the influence of their peers. They're embarrassed to identify themselves with anything that's spiritual sometimes because they don't want to be mocked. Then there's the nation Amalek. Later on, they meet up to this nation that fought a war with them, and Amalek is seen as a nation, a genocidal nation that throughout history tried to destroy the Jewish people. And in our own day and age, we are now experiencing the evil of this genocidal nation known as certain Islamic ideologies, Hamas among them, ISIS, Al-Qaeda. But what did Amalek do to the Jews? He attacked us when we were on the road. It's a time of vulnerability. If you ever remember when they used to go to airports, you would find all sorts of cults trying to get you involved, get young people involved. Why do they go to airports? Because that's where you're most vulnerable, when you're not home and you're not at your destination. So Amalek gets us, this internal Amalek gets us when we're vulnerable. And the word for the Torah uses, he met you on the way. That Hebrew word met, karcha, has two meanings, three meanings. One is met, literally, and the other one is cooled you off, and he chanced upon you. What does that mean, chance upon you? Amalek comes and tells you it was a coincidence. You heard the story before. You can be sure that you'll find an Amalek who'll hear the story and said, it was a coincidence. Everything is a coincidence. There's no real meaning to anything. That's the challenge from Amalek. And then when he sees that you're still impressed by this miracle, what does he tell you? He says, cools you off. Why are you impressed with a miracle? God could do anything. You shouldn't be impressed. He tries to use God's greatness as a way of cooling you off and desensitizing you. Also, the Hebrew word Amalek adds up to the same word in Hebrew as doubt. The Hebrew word for doubt is safek. And Amalek, but they both add up to 240. And whenever there's a correlation numerically, it shows you that they're either synonymous, they're connected, or they're opposites. Well, in this case, they're connected. Amalek sows doubts in you. There's nothing wrong with people asking questions. Judaism loves questions, but doubts are not questions. Doubts are the energy that tries to undermine your attachment to anything that's real. Because as real as it is, you're going to still have doubts.
What is the gematria of 24?
What is
40 is a different power of 24. What is the gematria of 24? Is there a correlation or meaning?
24? You could. There are 24 biblical books.
But when something comes in Gematria, when something comes to the power of 1 0 or 2 zeros,
It certainly has significance, but the 24 itself, the most common thing that we know is 24, the 24 biblical books. So Amalek opposes the biblical books, if you want to use it that way. Now we have Hanukkah. We're still in the second to the last day of Hanukkah, and there's a little game that people play, and that's the Dreidel. And the Dreidel is seen as a children's activity, but it's not. It has a very deep meaning. The four sides of the Dreidel correspond to the four exiles of the Jewish people: the Babylonian, the Persian, the Greek, and the Roman. These are the four exiles that undermined Jews and Judaism. And the four letters of the Dreidel correspond to the objectives of these four different empires. The Nun, the letter Nun in Hebrew, stands for the word Nes, miracle, but it also stands for the word Nefesh, soul. The Babylonians tried to destroy the soul of the Jewish people by destroying their holy temple. That's the holy temple physically represents the holy temple within us and within our souls, and the Babylonian king tried to destroy that. So how did it accomplish that? Spiritually, what was the greatest sin of the Jews at the time of the first temple's destruction? Idolatry, idol worship. When you worship idols, when you believe there's more than one God, when you deny the unity of God, the oneness of God, that undermines your whole spirituality. You can't be a godly person and believe in two gods. Two is not better than one. Two means that the one is not really God. There is no God. Paganism is really worshiping yourself, projecting your own vices and virtues, if you will, on an external God, but it's really serving yourself. And when you do that, your nefesh, your soul, is destroyed. The Gimel, the letter Gimel, stands for Guf. Guf means body. The Persians, under the leadership of Haman, the prime minister of Persia, tried to destroy our bodies. I'm sure he didn't like Judaism either, but his main objective was to annihilate every man, woman, and child. And he came very close to succeeding in that by having the king sign an edict that in one day, every Jew had to be annihilated by his neighbors, by his friends, by everyone with whom he would come in contact. So that's the undermining of the physical existence of the Jewish people. The Greek Empire is the Shin. The Shin stands for Seichel, intellect. The Greeks tried to pollute our way of thinking, to impose its own cultural and ideological its own ideology on us. It tried to secularize Judaism. And then Rome has the Hay. The Hay stands for Hakol, everything. Rome worked on all different fronts. It tried to destroy our soul. It destroyed the Second Temple. The Romans tried to destroy our bodies. Between 1 million and 2 million Jews were murdered by the Romans at the time of the destruction of the Second Temple. People don't realize, people look back at Rome and the Colosseum and all these great things that the Romans did, the Greeks did and the Romans did, but these were ruthless, evil, murderous people. And Rome tried to destroy our bodies. It also promoted ideologies that they got from the Greeks, imposing it on us, banned the study of Torah. Rabbi Akiva, as I mentioned before, was murdered and tortured to death because he kept on teaching Torah. I also think that the letter Hey could stand for another Hebrew word, which is hergish. Hergish means feeling. That the Roman exile, which continues to this day, it's all under the rubric of Rome, desensitizes us. That's one of the worst things that could happen when you lose your sensitivity. And if you look at the four letters of the Dreidel, these four letters, numerically, they add up to 358. If you remember my JetBlue story, 358 is the numerical value of the word Mashiach. That when Mashiach comes, It'll restore God's unity. The refinement of the physical will be submerged in the knowledge of God. The whole world will have this exposure to the knowledge of God and not false gods and false knowledge, not secularization of. Even the secular will become holy, and we'll have our full emotional health.
Neskadel Hayasham, right? Isn't that also part of the goal?
That's what the letters stand for. A great miracle happened there, but the Maharal and others explain that it refers to the nefesh, the soul, the guf, the body, the seichel, the intellect, and hakol, or everything, or hergish. Hergish, they don't say that. I added that one, but I feel that that's also part of it. So how?
And in Israel, it's not sham though; it's halt.
Right. So what's so powerful about Hanukkah? Hanukkah is the power to counter all these different threats and all these different obstacles. Because Hanukkah is an 8-day holiday, and 8 is very significant in Judaism. Circumcision occurs on the 8th day. Why is 8 so significant? Because 7 represents the totality of nature. Nature goes with 7. There is no such thing as anything more than 7. Everything that goes beyond 7 is 7 plus 1. There was multiples of 7. We have 7 days of the week. There is the Maharal, one of the great 16th century authorities, explains that everything really, time and space, have 7s in them. For example, if you take 6 coins of the same size and you put them in a circle, and you take a 7th coin and you put it in, it'll touch all the 6. It won't work with any other number. If you take, let's say, 7 coins and you put one in between, it won't touch all the 7. If you have 5 coins in a circle and you try to put one in the center, it won't fit. So this explains that everything in terms of space and time is 7. Yes?
What's interesting too is that if you look at numerology, 3, 5, 8, you take 3 plus 5 plus 8 gives 16. Break that down to 1 plus 6.
7, right. Very good. So 7 represents the totality of nature. And even Shabbos is part of it, even though it's the highest form of nature. Mashiach is connected to the number 8, which transcends nature. It's the ability to get rid of all the things that limit us, all the things that inhibit us, all the things that lower us. It has such power. So Hanukkah, rather than being what people think is a minor holiday, is actually the most major of holidays because it has the power to change the whole world. The light of Hanukkah, it says, will never cease burning. While other holidays, the Midrash says, will pale in comparison to the new holiday that we'll have, celebrating the redemption, Hanukkah will still shine brightly because Hanukkah is the light of Mashiach. It is this number 8 that transcends all the limits.
Rabbi Greenberg to Pardes said that 7 is the number of God's will. 8 is a sign of God, or man's completion of what God is ascribing to do.
Okay, that's true. There's a story in the Talmud about a Roman official challenged Rabbi Akiva. He says, "Why would you perform circumcision? You're improving on God's work." He says, "Next time you go home, ask your wife to serve you some wheat." You can't eat wheat. You have to process it. You have to grind it. You have to. But you're improving on God's work. Wheat is God's work. Yes, that's what we're here for. We're here to improve on God's work. God made us partners in His creation. That's very true. Okay, any questions? Yes.
So, so Hanukkah is not just like a minor fun holiday then?
It's only called minor because there are no restrictions. You don't have to withdraw from the physical world. On Shabbat and the holidays, you can do certain things. But Hanukkah and Purim, likewise, doesn't have those restrictions. So that's why it's called minor. It has fewer commandments associated with it. But in terms of its spiritual meaning, it's not minor at all.
So it's not like Tisha B'Av, which is sort of a...
Well, Tisha B'Av is
not Tisha B'Av, but the Tu B'Shvat, I mean.
Tu B'Shvat, you could say, is a minor holiday.
Okay.
But even then, if you get to the spiritual dimension of it, it's, maybe comparing it to another holiday, it's less powerful, but it's still very powerful. And there's no such thing as minor. Let me just put it this way. In Judaism, there's nothing minor. That goes for people, that goes for mitzvahs, that goes for everything. Everything is major. And the question is it a major, or is it major, minor, or minor, major?